Nancy Jensen here. Today we are going to make a chicken stellini soup with a kind of a tomato-based broth with zucchini, carrots, kale, celery, all sorts of deliciousness in it. And then we're going to make a big batch of pumpkin muffins. We're going to do some with some cream cheese dollops in them and some with pumpkin seeds, but a big batch for my family that is starting to get in town. So let's start by getting our onions sauteed up for our soup so we can get that going. And then I'm just gonna prep my carrots and celery so that in the process of making my muffins, I can get those kind of coming in and out and going. Or, you know, I might just do the onions because the onions take a good bit of time to caramelize to get those flavors going. So we're gonna do kind of a, smaller dice on here, not super small, but enough to get you just nice, lovely bits of onions throughout. And then we're gonna toss them in our little Dutch oven over here and let it start to saute up and caramelize and get, its natural sweetness out, and really bring out that onion flavor to add into our broth. We're gonna add about a tablespoon of olive oil to our Dutch oven. So a good little swirl around. And I'm gonna turn my Dutch oven to about a 6, so, a smidge above a medium. We'll get our onions in here, and now we're gonna start working on our muffins. Here. Okay. I'm gonna wash the onion off my hand, just because I don't want any of that flavor transfer. And then I'm gonna grab a little spatula here. We're gonna give our muffins a nice little stir. Or our muffins, our onions, a nice little stir. Okay, just kind of coat your onions up with your oil, and then we'll just let them sit and heat and cook. Okay, let's get on to our muffins here. Again, I'm doing a double batch, so this is kind of double my typical recipe for them, and this is a sourdough base to it. So we're gonna start by adding in a whole cup of sourdough discard. So I fed up my sourdough this morning so that I can start making up some bread. And so we need a whole cup. So I saved some to the side. So I have my discard already. So 1 whole cup. I'll just use my little spatula here to get it all off. And this just keeps them so moist, and of course gives you the gut healthy benefits that sourdough has in it. So we've got our whole cup of sourdough discard, a 1/2 cup of melted butter. And we're just gonna mix these in together, kind of incorporate the butter into the discard. And then we're gonna add in 1 whole can of pumpkin. So typically you need 2 cups, and a can is just shy of 2 cups, but it will do just fine in there. I always wondered why they don't just make it 2 whole cups, but they don't. But it's just a smidge less than it, but it works fine with the recipe. So we're gonna do 1 whole can of our pumpkin puree. And don't do pumpkin pie filling, just our pumpkin puree basic. You can always make your own as well. I'm gonna add this all in here. And then we're gonna add in 4 eggs. And this is gonna be the base of kind of our liquid base for our sourdough pumpkin muffins, which taste so good. These are my kids' favorite muffins. Whenever I make them, they just love them. And they always want me to make them throughout the year, and I'm always like, oh, but they're like a fall muffin. I can make them in the fall, but I always end up making them all throughout the year because they are a favorite. Okay, Get that pumpkin puree mixed in there. Makes it all a lovely orange color now. And then we're going to add in 4 eggs. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Pop each yolk. That way they don't just run around in the bowl with you, but they'll mix up a little bit faster. And we're gonna mix them in now. This is a butter-based batter, so you wanna do all of your mixing, your good mixing before you add in your flour, because once you add in your flour, if you over mix it, it will lead to a stiff muffin instead of a soft and fluffy muffin. So get those added in. I want to just make sure and scrape up along the sides. Then we're going to add in our spices and our baking soda and vanilla. So let's give our onions. I'm going to turn them down to about a 4 now. That my Dutch oven's nice and hot. And we're going to give them a quick stir around as they all start jumping out at me. There we go. And now let's get on with our muffins. I'm going to do my dry spices and then we'll end with my vanilla. That way it's pretty, I don't have to use a different spoon for it. So we're going to do 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, so not baking powder but baking soda. So 1 and 2. And then ideally you would use 2 tablespoons of pumpkin pie spice, but because I'm running low, I'm going to make a little bit of a homemade pumpkin pie spice. So I need to see exactly how much I have here. So I've got about a half a tablespoon of pumpkin pie spice. And now we're going to add in about 1.5 tablespoons of cinnamon. 1 and a half. And I think I put them over here. Yes, I did. Allspice and cloves. We're going to add in about a half a teaspoon of allspice and 1/4 of a teaspoon of cloves. This is going to give you a little bit more of a Christmassy than a true pumpkin pie spice, but yeah, it's kind of getting us there. You could also add in like 1/4 a teaspoon of nutmeg if you wanted to, but I'm going to just stick with cloves because I'm kind of feeling it today. And about 1/4 a teaspoon of cloves, because cloves have a pretty strong flavor, so you don't want to go too overpowering with them. Okay, and then 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. 1, 2. We're going to mix these together, then we're going to add in 2 cups of brown sugar, and then we'll end with our flour, and then we'll have the base for our pumpkin muffins. And then we'll make some kind of that cream cheese dollop that we put in the muffins. We're going to make some of those just like, you know, Starbucks has that cream cheese pumpkin muffin. I'll make a couple little bit of that to add in. And then we'll throw some pumpkin seeds on some. So we'll have just a variety of different muffins here. And all pumpkin. Okay. Perfect. Now let's add in 2 cups of brown sugar. This is a 1/2 cup measuring one, so I'm going to have to use, kind of fill it up twice or 4 times. So, 1/2 cup. And we are at 1 cup. mix that in, then we'll add our flour in. But again, wait until the very end to add your flour so that your muffins stay nice and soft and fluffy. Now you can always use granulated sugar instead of brown sugar, but I do really love the flavor brown sugar adds to it. Just adds a little bit more richness to it. But granulated sugar also works well. We'll give you a lighter muffin altogether. And you can also do dark brown, which will give you more of a strong molasses flavor if you really love that. Okay, and you can just see how that brown sugar just gives it such a rich color too. It makes it nice and kind of a lovely brown. Okay, now we're gonna add in our 2 cups of flour, and we're gonna mix these until that flour is just incorporated, but again, do not overmix. This is why I love to use just a spoon to stir this up, not get like a hand mixer out, because over mixing will give you like a firmer muffin to it, so it's just not as nice. So 2 whole cups. And then we're gonna incorporate these until just mixed in. And again, resist the urge to make it smooth. You want a lumpy batter. A lumpy, chunky batter is going to give you a really fluffy and delicious muffin, especially when you're using a butter base. It's a much thicker batter, but I do love the flavor that butter gives over like using an oil. Oil will give you an even lighter and fluffier muffin, but butter gives you, I think, a better taste. There we go. So looks like we have all of it mixed in. Just do a couple swirls around to make sure you don't have any flour pockets. And there we go. This is our base to it. Before we scoop it in, let me get these onions stirred up. We're almost got this nice little caramelization going on. Then we'll be ready to add in our celery and our carrots here in just a second. So let's get our muffins filled out. So I've got 2 different types of muffin pans here. We're gonna do, these are gonna be my basic plain muffins, which are actually gonna be little pumpkins. And then we're gonna have my other muffins over here, which we'll do some with a cream cheese dollop in it, some with some pumpkin seeds. They have a lot of variety. So putting in here now for the pumpkin shaped ones, make sure you spray it down really well with some, I'm gonna turn this down a smidge, with some like non-stick spray. I'm using the baking one, which has a little bit of flour in it, because it does help them come out a little bit. But spray them down. There we go. I'm gonna make sure we're out. Perfect. You got me all the way through. Now, I'm going to spoon all of my batter kind of into these equally. That way I don't have, you know, them like misjudged or whatnot, and we get to it and we don't have enough for it. So I'm just going to go through, give a great big spoon to each one, and then of course we'll come back over and do it. But this is the best way, especially when you're making like a big batch, to even it out. I know you can get like those ice cream scoops that will give you like the perfect 1/4 of a cup in there. But you know, sometimes the good old simplicity of a kitchen spoon works. So. Get this in. I'm kind of really craving pumpkin muffins too. I just feel like it's such a fall, you know, Thanksgiving food. Especially, like, I know it's not popular, but I do not like pumpkin pie. But I love every other pumpkin dessert out there, but not pumpkin pie. But these are so good. So let's fill these guys up and then we'll go back over. Although I'm actually going to be making a gluten-free pumpkin pie here in a couple days for one of my sister-in-laws. I'm actually keeping it simple with the gluten-free instead of going with like making a gluten-free pie crust with, you know, like a flour-free one. I'm gonna do a ginger, like using gluten-free ginger snaps, because I feel like the ginger snaps with the pumpkin pie mix will just work out really well. I'm actually gonna do that.
You have a question. Will you be on when you do Thanksgiving cooking?
I will not be on because my Thanksgiving cooking, I won't be at our house. I'll actually be at my parents' house with like 50 other people. So it will be a little bit chaotic and crazy. We will be doing like a breakfast in the morning because every year for Thanksgiving, I cook up cinnamon. I make homemade cinnamon rolls and a bunch of other little things for breakfast. So I will be doing that in the morning because I'll make those here before I head over to my parents' house. Okay, we're gonna fill these back up, but I won't be doing there, but I will try to maybe catch, if we can, little snippets throughout the day, because it is a all-day cooking process, because again, it's for like 50 people. So let's get these guys filled up, and then we'll go back over to our little mini pumpkins here. It takes a lot longer to fill up 24 muffins than it does to do 12.
What's your favorite dishes for Thanksgiving?
So I make this homemade green bean casserole from scratch. Like it is, everything is from scratch. I make my homemade cream of mushroom soup base for it. I make my own onion straws, fresh green beans. That is probably my favorite dish on there. You know, I mean, there's always the classics. We've kind of had this same Thanksgiving spread for like the last 30 or 40 years. And I mean, it is the same, down to like crescent rolls that were such a staple in the 80s and 90s to Jolly Green Giants, peas and corn. Same stuff every single year. Creature of habit in our family. But I did add in my homemade green bean casserole a couple years ago, and it's quickly become a family favorite. But we have like kind of a different Thanksgiving tradition. We do, it's called the pickin' turkeys. So we have 3 deep fat fried picking turkeys that get delivered to our house in the middle of the day before our Thanksgiving feast. And they're literally, we pick on them. You know, they're like little appetizers. So we pick on those turkeys all day long. And then I smoke a turkey and we bake a turkey on there. So we all have 5 turkeys. And then we make our mashed potatoes, stuffing, sweet potatoes and parsnips, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, and the peas and the corn. And that's kind of our it. But it's a simple, it doesn't go super bougie. It's not a Southern Thanksgiving or whatnot. It's just the same menu every single year. Okay, let's make our cream cheese kind of filling for our couple of our muffins here, but I'm gonna give them a good shake. Let them settle down. Okay, this is pretty simple, easy kind of thing, but it is so delicious. We need about a half a cup of kind of room temperature cream cheese. A half a cup is half of a package. So this is 8 ounces in a cup. So cut it in half and there's your half a cup. So you don't need to like get out a spoon and measure it up for it. This gets you, just cut it in half and you'll have your cream cheese. And this is like so good. It's so much better than I feel like the Starbucks one, because the Starbucks one feels a little chemically tasting to it, you know, because I'm sure they have a bunch of like preservatives in it to keep it fresh. This does not want to open for me. Let me grab some scissors. But this one is just a very nice, it has a little mellow vanilla flavor to it. It's super simple. I remember when I made these, because it was like a new addition, my husband's like, can you add a cream cheese dollop to all of your muffins? And I was like, that might be a little over the top. But we're gonna add in a half a cup. And then we need a teaspoon of flour. And that's gonna kind of hold it all together. So let me grab my teaspoon of flour here. And I kind of just do a heaping teaspoon. Put it right over the top. There we go. And then let me grab my sugar because we're gonna use 2 tablespoons of sugar. And you wanna use just granulated sugar. Brown sugar will give your cream cheese like a brownish color to it. So kind of stick with just the basic. So 2 tablespoons of sugar. And it gives it just enough sweetness that it isn't too over the top. And then a half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And that is all you need to make your little cream cheese dollop base. We'll mix it up and then we'll put a little spoonful in each one, but it is wonderful. The flour kind of helps bind it together a little bit. Let me give my onions a little stir, but we're getting this beautiful caramelization on them, which is lovely. You see that nice browning on it. That's just the natural sugars caramelizing up, so that will add great flavor. Let's get a fork. We're gonna kind of whip this together. Put a little dollop in each one, sprinkle some pumpkin seeds, and then we're gonna bake these at 350 for just about 20 minutes. I forgot I needed to add in a teaspoon of cream. I was like, this is a little dry. Forgot my teaspoon of cream. There we go. And then we'll use it. You can also use like a little hand mixer if you wanted to kind of whip this into a nice smoothie. But if your cream cheese is nice and soft, it should incorporate really well with a fork. Just kind of go through it to break it up, and then it should incorporate quite well. There we go. Perfect. You don't want it to be too runny or whatnot, so don't add too much, liquid based like the cream in it, because it needs to hold its form in there in this, but it will have that perfect little bit of sweetness to it. There we go. This looks pretty darn good. Now you can always, if you want to, put in a splash of cinnamon or pumpkin pie spice to add a little bit of extra flavor to it. But I find it's just beautiful on its own. Okay, we're gonna go through here and I'm gonna put a little dollop right in the middle of each one. There we go.
You have a question. Did you use vanilla extract?
Yes, I did. A half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And you could use like vanilla bean paste if you wanted to. That works as well. Both options work in here. Let's see. And I put in about a teaspoon size dollop. Some of them are a little bigger, a little small. You don't want to put so much in where you just have this huge kind of chunk of cream cheese in there that is very overpowering. You want it to be, a touch of creaminess at the, at the top. There we go. Got our last little bit in. Beautiful. Just give it a little push down. Now when put in the oven and it heats up, it sinks down a little bit, but that cream cheese will stay kind of at the top, but the muffin will form up around it. And then we are going to just sprinkle some pumpkin seeds around a few of them to give you that true kind of look. So just some good old pumpkin seeds.
And how much sugar was in there?
Just 2 tablespoons of sugar. So not too much on the cream cheese thing. So, again, it's a teaspoon of flour, a half a teaspoon of vanilla, a teaspoon of cream, and 2 teaspoons of sugar. So we're going to do half of pumpkin seeds so you can have the Starbucks effect, and then we'll keep a couple without. These are ready to pop into the oven. We've got our basic ones in the cute little pumpkin molds because pumpkin muffin pumpkins are just kind of cool. And then we're going to pop this in. Again, we're going to bake these at 350. The traditional plain ones will bake for 20 minutes. Cream cheese typically needs about 2 minutes longer. So when we'll test them when they come out on there, let's see how they are. So I'm gonna set my timer for 20 minutes. And we'll be able to take the first batch out, and then we'll kind of assess the second one. Okay, let's get our soup finishing up here. We've got our onions beautifully caramelized, which is gonna add a ton of flavor into our soup. I've got 3 carrots here, which I forgot to peel, so let me pop them back up on here. Where is my peeler? We'll just have to use this one. Okay, this carrot is like the size of 2 carrots, so we're gonna, you know, it's kind of like the same as using 4 good sized carrots, but we've got things. So we're gonna just kind of take the whole kind of outer bit of our carrot off here, and that's just gonna get rid of this kind of dry outer crust to it, leave the nice part of the carrot behind. There we go. These all off. And then we're gonna dice these up. I'm actually gonna quarter them. This one I might actually cut into 6 because it's such a thick carrot. That way they cook up nice and fast, and you'll get those flavors out into the broth a little bit faster. A cat scared me. Sometimes our cats sound like crying kids or whatnot. They're always weird and always lurking, but they make the funniest noises sometimes. What was it the other day? So we were at my parents' house, and they were pretty late at night because we built these like little bunk bed sets for Thanksgiving. So we built 8 bunk beds, or not 8 beds, 4 sets of bunk beds, and we kind of built it all in them to create this bunk room for all like the grandchildren and whatnot to sleep in at my parents' house. And we were coming up the stairs, we were doing our last finishing touches of it. We both swore we heard a cat in my mom's house, and apparently it was just right outside the door. But we were like, I know she doesn't have a cat, but there is a cat in this house. And it was just funny how loud it was on there. We'll have to take a little picture or video of this bunk room my husband and I kind of worked together on. I designed it and painted it, but he kind of did all the hard labor part for it. But it turned out pretty epic on there. I did a little bit, but I'm not as skillful as he is. And it turned out really, really cool. It was like one of those things where you have this vision and you hope it turns out, and it just is awesome. And it's now where we went from being able to only sleep 8 people in that room before, because there's also like another bed and then a pull-out couch and everything. Now we can sleep like 14 people in it, so that's nice when you know, it's a lot of grandchildren. My mom has a lot of grandchildren, and our Thanksgivings, like I said, we're cooking for 50 people. It gets pretty chaotic. Okay, we've got our carrots going in. I'm just gonna clean up a little bit of this, and then we'll get the rest of our carrots in, and then we're gonna get our celery in for things, and then we're gonna add in some tomato paste to kind of bring out a richness flavor. So we're gonna have canned diced tomatoes and tomato paste to bring this nice, lovely kind of tomato flavor, and we're kind of leaning in on some Italian spices, oregano, basil, kind of to flavor up our broth for this. So almost, it's gonna be a chicken stellini soup, but we're gonna have flavors similar to a minestrone in there, so it'll be all delicious and good, but nice and hearty. It's funny, so we were in Atlanta this weekend for my 10-year-old soccer tournament, and it was like so hot there. It was like 75 degrees, and I was not used to it because I packed all like sweaters and whatnot. It was so hot. We get back here and it was like 40 degrees last night, and I was like, oh, chilly. Well, you know, Tennessee and Georgia aren't that far apart, but the climate was very different in there. But it was a great weekend. My daughter's team, they made it to the finals round, but they lost in PKs. So the final game, the championship game, was 0-0. But they made it to they kept it 0-0 things, and then they made it to overtime, and then they did PKs, and we lost in PKs 4-5. So that was, or I think technically it was like 3-4 because they missed one and we missed 2, but it was really wonderful game. She played lights out. She was asked, by her coach to take this defensive position the whole final game because coach knew there was a player on this other team that scored all the goals. And she told her, she was like, Evie, I need you to play this position. I need you there because you're the only one who can take her down. And Evie kept her. She couldn't score a single goal on her, so we were pretty proud of her. She played really, really hard. So it was a good weekend, but we were there late. Didn't get home till really late last night, but it was a lot of fun. We also went to the Georgia Aquarium, which I have to say I've been to, several aquariums. That is by far the best aquarium. It was so thoughtfully designed, and coming from like my background is early childhood and whatnot, and it was just really designed well with children in mind, and just was such a great aquarium there. We had a lot of fun with that. And then of course we had to go to IKEA while we were there, because anytime I go to a city that has IKEA, and I have to go there. Let's add in our celery. We've got about 3 big stalks of celery that we diced up. So we have some just nice little chunks of veggies in each bite. Beautiful. Okay. Let's mince up a little bit of garlic. We're going to do just a few cloves here. You know what? We'll just mince up the rest because I don't have a lot in here. And I have bought like 3 more bags because they were on sale. It's always the nice thing is Thanksgiving week always is lovely with the sales when you go grocery shopping. So I always stock up on a lot of these non-essentials because everything's on sale. It's nice and it's always wonderful. Okay, let's get these guys minced up nice. We'll throw it in here to add a nice little lovely garlicky flavor to our broth. Then we're going to add in some tomato paste, kind of make it nice and rich, and then our diced tomatoes, and then our broth and our stellini pasta, and we'll let it start to cook up and simmer. Okay. Let's pop this guys in here. And I'm going to wash my hands since I'm a little bit of garlified. Okay, we'll give it a good stir.
You have a question? Are you streaming tonight, and what are you making?
We are streaming tonight, and I actually know what I'm making, so I have a plan. I was at the store with my 15-year-old daughter, and she was like, can we have beef Wellington? And I said, well, I don't think they're going to have beef tenderloins here, but I can make what I call the poor man's version of beef Wellington, which is where you use a steak and, you'll do the pastry cut in it, but it's not a beef tenderloin because, one, A, that's expensive, and B, it's not easy to find at every grocery store. So we are going to do what I consider the poor man versions of a beef Wellington for dinner tonight. So I'm pretty excited. We have a little bit of a smaller crew because 2 of my kids are going to a Preds game tonight with cousins, so they'll be out, so it's kind of nice. Okay, we've got our garlic in there toasting up. Let's add in our tomato paste, and then we're going to add in some spices, allow those flavors to really come out. And since I do want a good tomato base to the broth, I'm going to use a good heaping tablespoon or so of tomato paste. Tomato paste is a great way to add that nice tomato flavor to a broth without making your broth base super thick like a tomato sauce does. So it's just really nice. So again, we're going to add in a nice heaping tablespoon. And I'm going to give this a nice stir around. There. Kind of coat it up. And I will say that tomato and that garlic together is just wonderful. And now we're going to add in some of our spices and let them have some heat. So we're gonna start with like an Italian seasoning. I'm using Mrs. Dash's Italian medley, but it's basically Italian seasoning. We're gonna add in about a teaspoon of that.
You have a question? How did you learn to cook?
You know, just years of practice. I started cooking family dinners for my family growing up when I was 13 years old. And I just really enjoyed cooking, so I read lots of books and watched lots of shows and got the magazines and just taught myself over the years. And I just have loved it ever since. I'm going to add in about a teaspoon of dried oregano. I'll use the rest of that up. So just honestly, the cook I was when I first started is not the cook I am now, you know. But you learn things over the years, just practice, and you know, you perfect your skills and you learn palettes that go together well. I feel like it's something that people, if they just dedicate a little time to, they really can. I'm going to add in about a teaspoon of basil, dried basil. We're going to add in 2 bay leaves. But that's, I think, like the whole idea behind, like, you know, streaming my cooking is to show people, like, you guys can do these skills. You guys can chop them up and add the spices and you can make something delicious. You know, it just takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of patience. And I will say, you will mess up. You will burn things. You will make things that don't turn out fantastic. I've done that plenty of times. I still do that. That's life. But you learn from your mistakes and you learn not to do those things again. You know? And hopefully you don't make too big of mistakes. I remember one of my, I think it was maybe the second or third date with my husband now, I made ribs, and I had at the time in a little apartment oven. And so I was baking them based on how I baked them back home in our full-size things, and I burnt them so bad. And you know what? It didn't scare him away too much. Okay, we're gonna add in about a half a teaspoon of black pepper. I'll just let that kind of sit up and kind of coat this nicely. Then we're gonna add in our diced tomatoes. You could also use about 3, you know, fresh tomatoes, like vine ripe, or 4 plum tomatoes diced up. You're gonna put your juices and all in here, so put the whole can in. And then just kind of mix it in. This is gonna add a little bit of a liquid base to it, so just scrape along the bottom. Just like this. Scoop around any bits that like to climb up the sides. Perfect. And now we're gonna add in our broth. I'm gonna be using chicken bouillon and water. I'm gonna start by adding in 1 cup, and then we'll do our deglazing of the pot. We did a little bit of it with the tomatoes, but now we'll do kind of the rest to make sure we get any of those spices or whatnot that have crisped up on the bottom. And as you add the liquid in, it's going to rehydrate that tomato paste, which then will give it also a really lovely kind of flavor to our broth. So we're gonna add in another cup of our water, and then at the very end, we'll add in a big scoop of chicken bouillon. Here. And just, I always say, don't just dump it all in at one time. Little by little, that way you can mix it together, and it just incorporates nicely instead of kind of flooding your pot. I just find it allows you to add the appropriate amount, especially if you're making like stews that might you want a thicker consistency on. This one's going to be more of a thinner base soup, so you don't have to worry about it as much, but when you do a stew, you don't want to add it too fast. Okay. We've got this in here. I'm going to turn my burner up. Let's add in a big scoop of our chicken bouillon. I'm probably going to need a little bit of both. And then we're going to add in our stellini pasta, which is like little stars. So I want a heaping tablespoon of chicken bouillon. And I don't quite have enough in this jar, so I'm going to move to my other one. But I'll start with this. Let me open up a new one. Now you could always use chicken broth instead of water and bouillon. I just personally like bouillon better. I feel like I can use a little bit of more of the base than than just using like the broth, which I find is pretty bland unless you make it yourself. Got it open. Whew. Okay. Add a little bit more. So again, we wanted about a heaping tablespoon. I like to say, or your large kitchen spoon. We'll mix that in there. And that's gonna add both the saltiness to the broth as well as a little bit of flavor. Especially because our protein that we're using is some shredded chicken. Add a little bit of taste. Perfect. Okay. Let's add in our stellini pasta. This pasta's little, but it does almost get like twice its size as it soaks up the liquid. So don't add in too much of it. I'm gonna go with about a 1/3 cup. So that's like a 1/4, and then a little bit more. A little bit of pasta goes a long way. I find that one of the biggest mistakes is with pasta or rice into a soup is people add too much, not realizing that it's going to expand and soak up a lot of that broth. So if you add too much, you're going to end up with more of a pasta and a pasta sauce than a soup. So just always use a little bit less. And same with rice, because it does expand a lot. Now, stellini pasta with the little stars, it's really nice because it's not a pasta that gets kind of soggy when it cooks. A lot of noodles don't hold up well being in a broth, but that pasta does. Okay. Now we'll let that kind of cook up here, and let's get our zucchini and our kale prepped up to add in here. Let me kind of clean up a little bit of this mess first. So I had a little zucchini to add in here, but since I was like, oh, that will go perfect because we've kind of got this Italian tomato base for it, and I just feel like zucchini fits so well with those flavors. So I'll add that, and then of course the kale to add a bit more green, and then I have about a pound or so of shredded chicken that I had saved from last week, right before we left on Friday. So with your zucchini, I'm going to quarter it. That way you don't have massive pieces of zucchini in here. And it's going to allow that you just have a small part of the seeds in there. The inner part of the zucchini will get as very tender and doesn't hold its form well. So cutting it up like this allows it to have each part have a good piece of skin and kind of prevents it from just kind of getting soggy. I'm also cutting it a little bit thicker again because I want it to hold its shape well. If you cut it too thin, it's gonna get mushy. And for this, definitely keep your skin on. Do not peel the skin off of your zucchini. There we go. So we'll add in. We'll let that start to cook up. And you could add the zucchini in during kind of the vegetable sauteing process, but I find that zucchini is very much like a sponge. It's very porous, so it will soak up this broth and it will flavor it wonderfully. And you don't really need to get that saute on it. It's gonna kind of hold its form just fine.
You have a question. When would you peel zucchini?
There are some dishes where if you get, I will say not some dishes, some zucchini has a really tough skin on it. Those are the zucchinis that I peel. So if you go to a farmer's market and you find a giant zucchini, they're like this big, that zucchini typically has a really tough skin. And so I peel that skin off because it is really chewy and not edible. Most of the time, mostly you keep it on there, but it really depends on what type of zucchini you have gotten for it. And I've just learned that through things, and it's always the giant ones, and it's the ones you get at the farmer's market. They're like this big, and it's like the coolest, and I'm like, I've got this 10-pound zucchini. Who needs a 10-pound zucchini? Nobody. But when I see it, I have to buy it because it's just things. Then I'm like, okay, we're gonna make zucchini muffins and all sorts of deliciousness with it. But its skin gets really chewy, so I always peel the skin off of those because they are tough. And I don't know if it's because it stayed out in the sun so long to kind of grow or whatnot. Okay, give this a nice stir. Of course, man overboard, we'll put them back in there. Just make sure you scrape off any noodles that might stick, like the little stars on the bottom of them. We're gonna let that simmer, then we'll add our kale in. I'm gonna bring it down just a smidge. We'll also add our chicken in. So we're gonna take off our first batch of our muffins, because again, the one with the cream cheese typically needs about a minute or two longer. But you know what? They actually look like they might be done. These are perfect. You know what? They're all done at the same time. Perfect. Okay. So again, these cooked at 350 for 20 minutes. Look how beautiful they are. Slide these guys right over here. So we have our ones that are in our little pumpkin shapes here. And when we'll take them out in just a second. You need to let it cool for about a minute, and then you take them out of your mold so they don't stick. Don't leave them in there too long. And then these are our pumpkin muffins with our cream cheese dollop. We have some with our pumpkin seeds on it, and then some just plain. Again, these muffins all have our sourdough discard in it, so they have that kind of gut healthy sourdough thing. But the flavor there is all of that kind of rich, wonderful pumpkin flavor. We did use brown sugar with it, so again, we have that kind of rich flavor to go with it. Okay, look at our broth here. I'm going to turn it down again because it has got a nice boil on it. We're going to add in our kale, then we'll add in our chicken, and we'll be about ready to eat here. Just needs a little bit of time. So I'm using 2 big leaves of kale because this creates a lot of kale. Kale is not going to wilt down in your stew like a spinach is. So it kind of holds its shape very well. And it's great. It loses its bitterness with the cooking and kind of takes on the flavor of what you're stewing. Do make sure you chop it up well because you don't want to be eating and then you get this huge long ribbon of kale. So we'll get this chopped up into smaller, manageable pieces. We'll pop it in there to stew up, and then we'll get our chicken in. I don't add, because I'm using my chicken, when I made chicken noodle soup last week, I cooked up a bunch of chicken, and then I put some in the freezer to save, because it was a lot of chicken. And so I don't like to throw it into my soup until the very end, because when you add pre-shredded chicken into a soup, if you cook it too long, it will fall apart. So it's best added at the very end. Okay, let's get our kale in here. Now, if you were going to use a spinach instead of kale, I recommend waiting until the very end to add it in right before you serve, because again, spinach will wilt away to nothing. Here you can see the zucchini is starting to get nice and tender. It's starting to get a little bit of a deeper yellow to it, kind of picking up those flavors in there. Okay, we'll let that simmer for a second. Now that we've had a chance for that just to cool down for a millisecond here, I'm gonna take my pumpkin muffins out, because again, my pumpkin muffins, you don't want them to sit too long in here. Now it is a non-stick container, but it can continue to, like, they will stick to it. But just look, they're cute little pumpkins. How perfect are they? A little pumpkin patch here. This is like a cool little tray. My mom bought it when I was in like high school. So this is like 20 years old. But it is from Williamson-Sonoma, but it's like the cutest thing. And they're all different kind of shaped pumpkins. They're not, each one is different. So you've got fat squat ones, you've got taller ones, bigger, wider ones. Put but they're cute. And if you dust them with a little bit of powdered sugar, it actually brings out their ridges really, really well. Okay. Beautiful. Now, let's add our shredded chicken in here. Again, I have about 2 pounds of, or not, a little over a pound, not quite 2 pounds of our chicken that was left over from when we made chicken noodle soup. Just gonna add a quick chop through it all because I did pre-shred it fairly well, but here's a couple big pieces. Now, if you don't want to cook up your own, I will say Costco does have wonderful rotisserie chicken that is shredded already. You can buy it in like these 2.5 pound packs. Love that. I use that a lot as well. But whenever I make chicken noodle soup, I have to use like chicken thighs and chicken breasts to make the broth because it makes the best broth. And therefore, I always have extra because I use a lot more. Give this a nice stir. Put our chicken in there. Kind of coat it up. And you just need to let it stew for just a minute or so to kind of warm up, bring up those flavors, but you can kind of see we've got our stars are starting to get nice and big in here. I'll see if I can pull up some, but you see they're little stars all the way around. They're just tucking in there, and they will continue to grow, but they've already I think, gotten at least 50%, if not 75% bigger than what they were. Beautiful. Let's try this. Make sure I don't need to add anything else. Beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna grab a little bit of Parmesan cheese out of the fridge, and then we are going to be ready to serve up our lunch today. Turn that down nice and low. But again, we have our beautiful pumpkin muffins, and the ones with the cream cheese is kind of my little take on those Starbucks ones, and they are so delicious. Grab my little Parmesan grater here. And we'll do our soup. Gotta have your freshly grated Parmesan, it just adds a little extra. Turn off our soup here. I've got my ladle. Slide it up there. For lunch today, we have our homemade chicken and stellini soup in a rich kind of tomato and chicken broth. Where it's filled with carrots, onions, celery, tomatoes, zucchini, kale, and of course shredded chicken. We've got our nice shredded chicken from the other week in there, and we're gonna add a little bit of our freshly grated Parmesan cheese into it. This is gonna add a little bit of extra pop of flavor. Here we go. And we will serve this with a pumpkin cream cheese muffin that we topped with some pumpkin seeds as well. It has sourdough discard in it, and it is kind of full of just this wonderful, rich kind of pumpkin spice flavor, cinnamon, allspice, and a little bit of cloves. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any recipes at home, you can go to our page and search for what we made. I've got our chicken tomato stellini soup with our pumpkin sourdough muffins, and you can watch them cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my cutting boards, my muffin tins, my Dutch ovens, all the different things I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for